I'm back, baby. Hopefully it is all working now. After some technical issues, the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast returns after a few days on the sidelines. We've got more injuries to discuss. Damn international breaks. Who is going to replace Edu? And there's a few names doing the round on social media. We'll touch on them and we'll take some of your thoughts and questions from the live chat as well. Greetings, everybody. First of all, a quick update because I'm not in the man cave, as you can see. It still exists. I still have access to it for now, but I've moved home in the last few days. Hence the drop-off in content lately. Felt like the international break was kind of the best time to make it happen. We're all over the place at the moment, so I'll be podcasting from room to room for a bit. So please bear with me. Basically, wherever there aren't boxes on display and whichever corner of the place we've made look semi-presentable, that's where you'll see me podcasting from on a daily basis. But I'll be squeezing myself into all the different areas of the house over the next week or so, I'm sure, until we get sorted and until I can sort a man cave here. So thank you so much for bearing with me, because I know that, you know, normally we have everything in the man cave and I can just walk in there and it's nice and easy for me and I can just press record, and it's not going to be like that for at least a few weeks, I don't think, while I'm sort of trying to get sorted and stuff. So yeah, apologies for the drop off in content. There was some content at the back end of last week. There is a Patreon piece that you can check out if you're a Patreon as well, where myself and Mike Stavrou discussed Kai Havertz at length. A lot of people suggesting that Kai Havertz isn't quite as effective this season as he was last season. I think that's probably fair to say, but I think there are reasons for that, and we discussed those at length and in great detail on that episode. So check it out over on the Patreon side of things. Another quick update, Mike Stavrou will be joining me later on today as well. I don't know why I lost my words there. Mickey Stavrou, the main man, will be joining me this afternoon to record an episode that will be with you guys tomorrow morning, where we are going to be rating all the players and the seasons that they've had so far out of 10. We'll be rating only those who have made 5 appearances or more, so we can try and condense it down a little bit. But we're going to be doing that this afternoon, and that will be available to you tomorrow on all major podcast stores and wherever else you like to listen to the pod from. So yeah, lots coming your way, and we're going to get back to a normal routine now. I'm not in a normal routine, but I will make sure that that doesn't spill over into the podcast now moving forward. But we've got a few stories to discuss today. We're going to talk about this new sporting director, if that's even the route that Arsenal decide to go down when replacing Edu. We know that he'll be leaving the football club. Bad news that, in my opinion. I've had some time to process it now, and I still feel the same way about that. So yeah, you know, there were people that were saying, oh, good riddance to him. You know, he hasn't done that great in recent times anyway. And, you know, he should have signed X player and he signed Y player and he couldn't sell this player for X amount of money and all the rest of it. I just think when you play a key role in a club clearly moving forward and clearly moving in the right direction, you got to think about where we were coming from. I think you have to give Edu credit for the job that he's done, and he's going to be difficult to replace. Now, I don't know this for a fact because I'm not claiming to be plugged in or to be in the know, but from listening to and speaking to some of my colleagues that work in the kind of in the press and in the media, and I'm far more connected than I am, there seems to be a kind of general consensus that the reason Edu left was because he felt that the club were maybe just pushing him to one side. Maybe his role was changing. It was going to be a role that saw him have less autonomy, maybe less power, if you want to put it that way. And as a result of that, he felt like this opportunity, aside from the fact that it's the opportunity to lead a multi-club model, to get promotion to a CEO, and obviously to earn a ton more money, I think he felt like maybe his time at Arsenal was done. And that was really, really interesting to hear, because over the last few years, one of the things that I would say has been a strength of Arsenal's is that, yes, Mikel Arteta is steering the team, right, and steering the club in a lot of ways. But if you go back to the Wenger days, one of the big criticisms we had was that one man had too much power, that one man controlled everything. And that's not to say that Arsene or Mikel ever have or had bad intentions for the club. But how much can one guy do? Like, spreading yourself thin across multiple jobs is going to mean a drop-off in the quality of your work somewhere along the line. And one of the things that always encouraged me about this model that we're currently operating with, and I know it's been tweaked a little bit recently, was that we had a manager in Mikel Arteta who had someone just above him who could sanity check what he was doing, who could sanity check some of the decisions that he makes, who could say no if he didn't think that something that maybe Mikel Arteta wanted was in the best interests of the club and had a good chance of being a success. And, right at the beginning, Mikel Arteta was appointed as a head coach. And over time, he was promoted to manager. And as the manager, you have more control. Obviously, you have a bigger say. But having the two of them there, and obviously all the other people in the background, Richard Garlick, Tim Lewis, etc., I felt comfortable that the club were making the right decisions because they were having to go through a number of people. And if they were going through a number of people, there was less chance of you making a really clear and obvious mess up, basically. If this is true, if it is that Edu felt that, the club was being built in a way where, or was developing in a way where he was no longer going to have the power to push back and question Mikel Arteta on certain decisions, I don't think that's healthy. As good as I think Mikel Arteta is, as highly as I rate him, as wonderful a job as I think he's done so far, I don't think it's ever good for one man to have that much power and to not have those people in place, sanity checking and being there to ask questions, to check on, to check that the decision that's being made makes sense to a lot of people, makes sense to the football club rather than to just one man. Look, Mikel Arteta's got that goodwill because he's done a wonderful job, I think, in recent seasons. And so if I were the sporting director and he came to me and he said, look, let's say Mikel Merino, for example, right? Because that was one of the deals that was rumoured to be contentious within the club's hierarchy during the summer. Like if Mikel Arteta came up to me and I was the sporting director and he said, look, I really want this player. And I went back and I said, well, he's 28 years old and, he's, I'm not sure. And I don't know if I want to give him this length of contract and I don't know about that salary. If the manager of my team, who had done so well, who had brought players in that everybody was laughing at when we signed them. I mean, remember the Kai Havertz signing, remember the reaction to that, and look at people now and the light in which they're discussing him. If my manager had a track record of doing things that were, that were good, but I maybe couldn't see it at the beginning, I'd probably give him a few free passes where I'd say, look, I'm not really totally on board with, for example, the Mikel Merino signing, but you've done really well so far. So if that's one that you're adamant you want to have, let's do it and let's see how it goes. Obviously, he's going to get some wrong. And as a sporting director, you've got to be sensible and you've got to, allow people to get things wrong sometimes because that happens in football. We're all human beings and football's a really unpredictable sport in its nature. So I just wonder if that dynamic had changed maybe as a result of our summer business. And if it had, that signals and points to perhaps Mikel Arteta having a little bit more power than I would say on a personal level I'm comfortable with. And that's not because I don't rate him, as I've said. It's because I don't think any one man should have that much control and power. I think there needs to be a team, and I think every decision needs to go through some sanity checks to make sure that it's in the best interests of the football club. So the Edu thing, him leaving, I don't know it, but reading between the lines, it seems like that dynamic had just changed a little bit, or maybe, the relationship was a little bit strained between him and maybe not necessarily Mikel Arteta, but maybe him and Richard Garlick. We know he was upset that he was overlooked when he wanted to go and take that CEO role. That's something that Edu had ambitions to achieve, and obviously that didn't happen for him. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. It's going to be interesting to see how they replace him and how this all pans out. And there's a couple of names that are being linked with replacing him, and one of them is Paris Saint-Germain's Luis Campos, the Portuguese, is said to be among the candidates to replace Edu at Arsenal. He's got a reputation for identifying exciting young talents, and he's currently at Paris Saint-Germain, but it looks like, going by all the reports that we're reading, he could be leaving Paris Saint-Germain come the end of the season. His contract is due to expire in the summer, and as of now, there is no agreement in place to extend his stay. Is this a good option? Well, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because when we're talking sporting directors, it's not like we're judging players. We don't have loads of stats to go by. We don't have the eye test necessarily to go by. We can look through and rummage through some of the signings they've made, some of the players that they've brought in. And if you look through Luis Campos's list, I guess, you will find a lot of exciting players and a lot of exciting names. He's identified a lot of talented players at Paris Saint-Germain. The club have gone out and got them. And I think that club is in a much healthier state than it's been in recent years, even when it had your Neymars and your Mbappes and your Lionel Messis, because what they've done is understood that actually just bringing in what Real Madrid would call Galacticos all the time isn't the way forward. Sometimes you need to make a team based on cohesion. Sometimes you need to build a team based on relationships, based on togetherness. Camaraderie has to be important as well. And sometimes you can get that easier when you don't have so many big egos to deal with. And I think PSG are moving in the right direction. So I look at Luis Campos and I think, that's a name that I would consider. Have I forensically studied all the work that Luis Campos has done in the past? No, but if I think about the kind of top line stuff, clearly got a good eye for talent, clearly understands what it's like to work at a club where there's huge pressure and expectation. Paris Saint-Germain, for the last decade, have been expected to win the Champions League every single bloody year. So the expectation level and pressure, he's okay with dealing with that. And, it's kind of, he would be someone that would be looking at it through the same lens in terms of wanting to sign players of a young age, players that are going to develop, that are going to become either really sellable assets or key members of your squad moving down the line. But also, he's got to win now. That's how it works at Paris Saint-Germain. And Luis Campos feels like a good fit for me, just looking at the top line stuff. If it was to develop or transpire that we are in discussions with him, those conversations are going on. If we're to learn that, then of course we'll do some more analysis on him and we'll try and figure out a little bit more about what's behind the name Luis Campos. But when I first read that story, and I think it was on Sky Sports that I read it, I thought, that's not a bad fit. Another person that's been linked is Roberto Olabe. He's just announced that he's leaving Real Sociedad. He's said to be in the frame for the Arsenal role as well. Shares a connection with Mikel Arteta because I believe, from what I read, that he's the manager that signed him for the club. So culturally, they'd be on the same page. Stylistically, they'd be on the same page. This is a really, really interesting one. Have we approached him? Is that why he's leaving? He says it's not, but are we going to buy that 100% at this stage? I don't know. I don't think you give up a role like that unless you are quite confident that there's another role out there for you, that fits with what you want, that matches your ambition. And an Arsenal role certainly would match most people's ambitions, wouldn't it? So Roberto Olabe is another name in the frame. So there's two names at the moment that we're hearing. Paris Saint-Germain's Luis Campos, who, as you guys rightly point out in the chat, was at Lille previously, where they had a good track record of bringing in young, exciting players as well. And, of course, Roberto Olabe, who is due to leave Real Sociedad at the end of the season. So those are the two names in the frame. Let me know in the comments what you think. Again, they're sporting directors, man. Like, should sporting directors be as big a talking point as they are these days? It's a real kind of eye-opener to me around how football's changed over the years, that we talk about the guys in suits as much as we talk about the guys on the pitch these days. But yeah, those are two of the names being linked. Let me know what you think in the chat. A couple of other stories I do want to touch on this one. Robin van Persie has been discussing the possibility of coaching Arsenal in the future. And he said, I don't expect to work at Arsenal. I think that door is closed because of my switch to Manchester United. That is my assessment. You never know in football, but that is my assessment. Look, the whole Robin van Persie to Man United thing, at the time, I was heartbroken. Maybe even a little bit angry, because I felt that Robin van Persie, more than most, owed Arsene Wenger for a number of reasons. Arsene Wenger picked him up when he was a young player, making his way, and when he was the subject of some really, really serious criminal allegations. A lot of managers and a lot of clubs would have said no. Now, it was subsequently found that he was innocent, and I always believe innocent until proven guilty. And I'm not going to go into it because of obvious reasons, but I think there's a name in the Premier League right now that keeps getting thrown around. There's someone who has done something that's criminal. And if it is known and if it is fact that that person has done that, then they should absolutely be kicked out of their football club without second thought. But you have to let these things go through the required processes. And I'm not saying that anybody's guilty, and I'm not saying that anybody's innocent. I'm simply saying that I don't know. And I think that it's really important in those situations that you allow what needs to happen. Now that justice isn't always served, we know that. We see that every day in the world. But I can't comment on something that I just don't know about. I think that's wrong as well, because I think that's pouring fuel on the fire. When maybe there isn't, or there shouldn't be a fire in the first place. Maybe there should, and if so, you got to just trust and hope that the people dealing with it deal with it in the right way, and it gets to the conclusion that's necessary. But right now, my honest thing on it is I just don't know, guys. So I link that to the Robin van Persie situation, because this was a player that was facing some allegations, and the club, obviously quite confident in his innocence, took him on. So I think he owed Arsenal for that, because not a lot of clubs and managers would have done that. He had a lot of injury problems during his time at Arsenal, and you know, it would have been really easy for Arsene Wenger to say, I'm not sure about you, mate. Like, you're not serving me very well at the moment. You're not doing it for me. You're clearly talented. I think we all saw that from the first day that Robin van Persie arrived at Arsenal. That left foot was a wand, a magician's wand, truly beautiful, a thing of magic and wondery. But he was never fit. So as a manager, you probably face some really tough conversations with the hierarchy, with other players in the squad. You keep keeping this guy around, but he's not really delivering for you. And it took a number of years for Robin van Persie, in my opinion, the little thumbs up, to sort of grow into the role. But, you know, for him to get to a point where he was fit regularly. And when he was magnificent. And that decision was completely vindicated and justified by us, and in the end. But then he left, and he left at a time when we were struggling, and he was our main man. And to join a bitter rival of ours like Manchester United, that cut deep and it hurt. And at the time, he said that Arsenal had promised him a contract, and that was never instigated and never done. And he never got the feeling from the other side that there was a real want to sign him up to the new deal. And he had ambition. He had ambition to go on and win the Premier League. And his decision was obviously justified in the end, because he went on and won the Premier League under Alex Ferguson at Manchester United. So, I was angry at the time. I was upset at the time. But to be honest with you, I look back on it now and I'm like, what affiliation does Robin van Persie have to Arsenal? Like, he's not an Arsenal fan. I think he owed the club something, but he also needed to do his thing. And I feel the same about Cesc Fabregas, really. I know it didn't go as the same for Cesc Fabregas, and he was at a different stage in his career. But both of those guys could clearly see behind the scenes things that we couldn't see, right? Which pointed to the fact that we were not moving in the right direction. And there was no willingness at that point to invest what needed to be invested, to push in ways that we needed to be pushing, to try and progress and develop as a football club and get back to the pinnacle. There was no desire within the club at that point, based on everything we hear now and heard during that time, to get there. So can we blame players who come from a foreign land, who, make it their home, but can we sort of begrudge them going at some point, well, this isn't enough for me, and wanting to move on? I don't think we can. So I'm over it. It hurt. It will always be a black mark against Robin van Persie's name for me, the fact that he played for Manchester United and the way he left. But, you know, if he's the right person for a job somewhere down the line, I'm not going to be up in arms if we hire him, if that makes sense. I don't think it's an easy one to do. Like, it's a hire that you make only if you're certain it's going to work, because you know you're going to get backlash. It's a bit like when Chelsea hired Rafa Benitez, right? You knew that if that didn't work, everyone was going to let him know about it really, really fast because of his Liverpool history. But anyway, Robin van Persie saying that he doesn't expect to work at Arsenal. I don't expect him to work at Arsenal. And until I see more from him as a coach, I'm not even going to say that I want him. Why would I? I think there are far better coaches out there right now if we were in a position where we had to change coach, manager, whatever. Another story that I just want to wrap up on is with regards to another injury. Leandro Trossard. Yes, another player has gone down on an international break for the Arsenal. Leandro Trossard was substituted off by Belgium in their game against Israel last night. I've got no information about the severity of the injury. I've got no information with regards to whether he'll be available for our next game. But Leandro Trossard did go off with an injury. And it's not even about Leandro Trossard. It's just that frustration of, again, international break comes around. Again, our players go. Again, our players are worked into the ground. And again, one of our key players is forced off with an injury that puts his participation in Arsenal's next fixture in doubt. And maybe even beyond that. So there's just a bit of frustration from me on that. As I say, I don't know the details. I don't know if he's going to be available when we return to action next weekend. I'm hoping he is. Although he's not in my best 11, Leandro Trossard, I think he's a really useful player to have around if utilised in the right way and in the right position. Not as a false 9, not as a second striker, not as a 10, not as an 8. If he comes on from that left-hand side and drifts into the penalty area in the way that we know he can, he's a useful asset. Just very, very quickly before I round up, there's a couple of comments and questions that I just want to quickly touch on. Damien Kelly, with regards to what I was saying about Mikel Arteta, he says, where is it? He's getting too powerful before he's even won a Premier League title. I think there's a fine balance, right, between giving someone the power and autonomy that they need to do their job to the best of their ability, but also having that line where their stuff is sanity checked, their decisions are sanity checked, their decisions have to be seen to benefit the club on the whole, etc., etc. So yeah, let's see what happens with that. But just some stuff I'd heard about Edu maybe feeling a little bit left out of the current model, and I think that did play a part ultimately in him leaving, sadly. Lots of you commenting on the backdrop. Guys, I'm sorry. As I mentioned right at the top of the pod, if you're just joining us, I've moved home, yesterday? I had no internet for a few days. I've got boxes piled up to the ceiling everywhere you bloody turn. So I'm literally just finding any corner that looks semi-presentable to podcast from at the minute, because I haven't got a man cave in this place. That was one of the big drawbacks. I'm going to have to build one, which might take me a little while. So we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, lots of you mentioning that Robin van Persie mocked us. He did, but I don't get too precious about players doing things like that in the moment, because if someone runs out onto the pitch to play against you and you call them every name under the sun, you slag off their wife, their mother, their kids, you accuse them of things that they've been cleared of in the past, etc., etc., that's going to wind someone up. If I ran out to play at the Emirates and all of you started shouting abuse at me, I'm not going to like it. I'm not going to take it well. I'm a human being. I'd probably snap as well. So I don't really get too bogged down by those types of events. Like, they don't really get to me. Like, they get to me in that moment, and at that time I get angry and I might bite back, but it isn't something that I hold a grudge for. It isn't something that I would carry forward for years and years and years and years. Life's too short, guys. Don't be miserable. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I will take some of your questions on the next episode, I promise. We've got another one being recorded later today. Myself and Mike Stavru are going to be putting a nice one together for you, looking back at the season so far, rating each of our players that have made 5 appearances or more. I think that's going to be a fascinating conversation. If you've got any questions, leave them in the chat box. Not the chat box, the comment section, I should say, on YouTube, and I'll take those on. Alternatively, hit me up on X at Harry Symeou. I need to check out this blue sky thing as well, by the way. I've been so busy the last few days, but everyone's talking about it. I'll have a look at that as well. Maybe you can follow me on that if I get set up over there as well. Just the idea of managing another social media platform. It's just like, anyway, thank you for tuning in. Really, really do appreciate it, and I'll see you all on the next one very, very soon. Thanks for bearing with me. Cheers. Goodbye.